Please.
Just stop crying. In a mansion where the chandeliers sparkled like frozen stars, the sound that ruled every night wasn't music. It was a 2-year-old's desperate wail. Little Noah weighed nearly 50 pounds, his tiny legs trembling under a body that shouldn't have been that heavy. At 3:00 a.m., the whole house would jolt awake to the same routine crying panic, and food rushed upstairs like a fire extinguisher. 5 nannies had already quit. His mother, Evelyn, stood in front of her mirror each morning with shaking hands and a pill bottle she called vitamins, her eyes empty like someone had moved out of her body. His father, Graham, left before sunrise and came home with his phone glued to his palm, present in address, absent in soul. The mansion was spotless, expensive, and emotionally abandoned. Then Renee, the new housekeeper, arrived to clean floors and organize closets. She wasn't hired to love anyone. But the first time she heard Noah's crying, she didn't hear hunger. She heard fear. Upstairs, Renee found a nursery that looked like a luxury showroom, and a toddler sitting in the middle of it, red-faced, breathless, surrounded by snack wrappers. A feeding station, a place where tears had been trained to mean calories instead of comfort. Renee knelt, offered her hand, and spoke softly. "You're safe. I'm right here." Noah's sobs faltered, then stopped. Because what that child needed wasn't more food. He needed a human being who wouldn't leave him alone in the dark. This house has everything. So why does it feel so empty? From the outside, the Whitmore estate looked like a dream carved in marble iron gates, silent fountains, windows that reflected the sun like mirrors of success. But inside, it felt more like a museum after closing hours. No laughter, no warmth, just space. Too much space. And a child crying somewhere deep inside it. Evelyn Whitmore moved through those halls like a ghost wearing designer silk. Every step echoed. Every room reminded her of who she used to be before exhaustion hollowed her out. Motherhood hadn't arrived like the joy she'd imagined. It came like a storm. She was never taught how to survive. Noah cried day and night, and every cry felt like proof that she was failing. So she did the only thing that worked even for a moment. She fed him. Again and again. Food became the pause button on her shame. Upstairs, Noah learned a cruel lesson far too early. Silence came only after eating. His tiny body grew heavier, rounder, slower, but no one noticed the real weight crushing him. Loneliness, fear, the absence of arms that stayed. And Graham, his father. Graham lived on planes and phone calls, convincing himself that providing meant protecting. He told himself the house was safe because the bills were paid. That distance was temporary, that love could wait until later. But later never came. It never does. At night, when Noah cried, Graham stared at the ceiling in another city, while Evelyn pressed a pillow over her ears, whispering, "Please, just stop." Not because she didn't love her son, but because she was drowning, and no one had taught her how to ask for help. Money filled the rooms, but connection never crossed the threshold. The mansion held everything except presence, except touch, except someone willing to stay in the noise instead of escaping it. And that was the quiet truth Renee walked into that morning. Not a spoiled child, not a broken mother, not an absent father, but a family bleeding silently behind perfect walls, waiting for someone brave enough to see them. Renee didn't arrive to change a life. She arrived with a pressed uniform, a packed lunch wrapped in foil, and instructions that were clear and narrow. Clean the floors, organize the closets, stay invisible. The Whitmore house greeted her with silence so thick it felt intentional. Curtains drawn, lights dimmed. A mansion wide awake, yet somehow asleep. Evelyn opened the door without a smile, her eyes skimming Renee the way people inspect furniture, quick, distant, already tired. "You're early," she said. Not hello, not welcome. Just a fact. Renee nodded. I like to be on time. She walked through rooms that were flawless and lifeless. Marble without warmth. Sofas no one sat on. Walls with no photos. It was a house curated to impress strangers, not hold a family. And then she heard it, a sound from upstairs. Soft at first. Then cracking. A child crying, not the whiny cry of boredom, but the raw, broken sound of someone who had learned that no one was coming. That's Noah, Evelyn said quickly, already walking away. You don't need to worry about him. That's not your job. Renee stopped, because she knew that sound. She'd heard it years ago, in cramped apartments, in hospital hallways, in the voices of children who weren't hungry for food, but for presents. That cry didn't ask for snacks. It asked a question no child should have to ask. Am I alone? Renee stood in the kitchen, hands wrapped around a cleaning cloth, every instinct in her body pulling her toward the stairs. She told herself the rules, the boundaries, the risk. She reminded herself she needed this job. But as the crying echoed again, sharper now, something inside her whispered louder. If you hear a child like that and do nothing, you don't forget it. Renee hadn't come to save anyone. She wasn't trained for this. She wasn't invited into it. But sometimes the moment you hear the truth of a place, you don't get to unhear it. And in that house full of wealth and silence, Renee understood something no one had said out loud yet. Noah wasn't being raised. He was being managed. And that was the moment everything quietly began to change. Renee climbed the stairs slowly, as if the house itself might protest. Each step creaked beneath her shoes, counting down the distance between what she was told not to see and what she already knew was there. The crying led her to the end of the hall, to a door left half open, almost like an invitation no one intended to give. Inside the nursery looked perfect at first glance. Designer toys lined the shelves, untouched and still wrapped in plastic. A crib that looked more like a throne. Stuffed animals arranged for display, not comfort. Wealth everywhere. Love nowhere. And then she saw Noah. He sat on the floor, not playing, not moving, just crying. His body was too round for his age. His clothes stretched tight. His breath heavy, like each inhale cost him something. His cheeks were red, his arms reaching out toward nothing. Toward no one. Renee felt her chest tighten. She knelt instinctively, but it wasn't the child that stopped her breath. It was the room itself. Empty snack wrappers littered the floor, cookie packages torn open, juice boxes crushed flat, food everywhere, but not a single sign of someone who had stayed. This wasn't a nursery. It was a system. A routine built on panic, cry, feed, silence, repeat. Renee understood in that moment what no chart or doctor's note could explain. Noah hadn't been eating because he was hungry. He was eating because it was the only time the world answered him. Every feeling, fear, loneliness, exhaustion, had been translated into calories. His little body had learned the rule too well: if I cry, food comes. If I stop crying, I disappear again. Renee extended her hand, palm open, not rushing him. "Hey, sweetheart," she whispered. Noah's sobs stuttered. His eyes met hers, confused, cautious, hopeful in a way that hurt to witness. When his tiny fingers finally touched hers, his crying stopped. Not because he was full, but because for the first time, someone had responded without bringing food. And Renee realized something that would change everything. You can overfeed a child and still starve them. And this boy had been starving for a very long time. Renee knew the line she was crossing. She felt it in the way her pulse quickened, in the way the house seemed to hold its breath as she sat down on the nursery floor instead of calling for permission. She wasn't supposed to touch him. She wasn't supposed to interfere. She wasn't supposed to care. But Noah was still reaching for her. She didn't lift him right away. She stayed low, eye-level, voice soft. "It's okay," she whispered. "I'm right here. No bottle, no snack, just words. just presence. His breathing slowed uneven at first, then steadier. His round little shoulders sagged like they'd been holding something too heavy for too long. When Renee finally picked him up, she expected him to squirm, to cry harder, to demand food the way everyone said he would. Instead, he melted into her chest, his forehead pressed against her shoulder. A long, shaky breath left his body, as if he'd been holding it for months. Downstairs, Renee made a choice that would change everything. She didn't reach for the cookie jars or juice boxes lined up like emergency supplies. She opened her own bag instead. A simple sandwich, sliced apple, carrots, food that didn't scream panic. She sat on the kitchen floor with Noah and broke the sandwich into tiny pieces, offering them slowly, one at a time. "Easy," she murmured. "It's not going anywhere." At first, Noah ate like the world might end if he didn't hurry, hands, shaking eyes darting. Renee didn't stop him. She didn't scold. She stayed. She spoke. She waited. And slowly something shifted. His grip loosened. His chewing slowed. His breathing evened out. When he finished, he didn't cry for more. He looked up at her instead, and then almost like he wasn't sure he was allowed. Noah smiled, a small, fragile smile. And without warning, he wrapped his arms around her neck and held on. Not for food, not for distraction, but because for the first time, comfort had come without conditions. Renee held him back, knowing she might lose her job for this, but also knowing something far more important. She hadn't broken the rules. She'd broken the cycle. "You're confusing him." The words cut through the room like glass. Evelyn stood in the doorway, arms crossed tight against her chest, her face carefully composed, but her hands were shaking. She had seen it. Noah calm. Noah quiet. Noah resting against someone else. And instead of relief, fear rushed in first. "I told you that's not your job," she said, her voice cold, rehearsed. "He needs to learn to self-soothe." Renee turned slowly, still holding Noah. The child clung to her shirt, his small fingers gripping fabric like it was the only solid thing in the world. He didn't cry. He just hid his face in her shoulder. Self-soothe. Renee had heard that phrase before in parenting books, in tidy theories, written far from real suffering. But this wasn't self-soothing. This was a child being left alone with feelings too big for his body. "With respect, ma'am," Renee said quietly, choosing every word with care. "He's two." Evelyn's jaw tightened. "You don't understand," she snapped. "He cries. You give him attention. Then he learns to keep crying." The pediatrician said. "He's not manipulating anyone," Renee said gently but firmly. "He's scared." The word landed heavy. For a moment, Evelyn looked like she might shatter. Her eyes flickered anger, exhaustion, guilt, all fighting for control. "You think I don't know that," she whispered. "Do you think I wanted this?" Her voice broke just slightly. "I'm so tired." The silence that followed was unbearable. Renee saw it then. Not a cold mother, not a careless one, but a woman drowning, terrified that if she stopped holding everything together, she would disappear entirely. A woman who had learned to silence her child because she didn't know how to survive the noise anymore. "I'm not trying to replace you," Renee said softly. "I'm just trying to help him feel safe." Evelyn looked away, tears burning behind her eyes. "Just don't make this a habit," she said, her voice hollow. Then she turned and walked out. But from the doorway, Renee heard it. A sound Evelyn thought no one noticed. A quiet sob. And Renee understood something painfully clear. This wasn't just about a child who needed love. It was about a mother who had forgotten she deserved help too. The house didn't fall apart all at once. It cracked quietly behind closed doors, swallowed words and long silences that screamed louder than any argument. Graham didn't come home that night, then not the next. When he finally did, his presence felt temporary, like a visitor already halfway gone. The air changed. Evelyn moved slower, her eyes dulled. And Noah cried more, not louder, just deeper. a sound that came from a place beyond hunger. Then one afternoon, everything shattered. Renee arrived to chaos. Cabinets hanging open, food everywhere, flour smeared across marble, crushed cookies underfoot. Juice spilled like something had exploded. In the center of the kitchen, Evelyn sat on the floor, wine bottle loose in her hand, laughing in a way that wasn't joy, but collapse. "He's gone," Evelyn said, staring at nothing. "Packed a bag. Said he needed space." Her laugh broke into a sob. "I guess I was too much." Renee's chest tightened. "Where's Noah?" The crying answered before Evelyn did. Upstairs, muffled, panicked. Renee ran. The nursery door was locked from the outside. "Noah," she called, panic clawing up her throat. She forced the lock open with shaking hands and pushed inside, and what she saw burned into her forever. Noah stood in his crib, gripping the bars, face red and soaked with tears. Around him, scattered like someone had given up entirely, were empty wrappers. Cookies, chips, juice boxes, candy, all dumped into the room like a cruel offering. Renee scooped him up, his body bloated, trembling, clinging to her like he knew something was very wrong. Downstairs, Evelyn whispered the truth through sobs. "I locked him in. I couldn't hear him anymore. I couldn't think." Silence filled the space between them. This wasn't exhaustion anymore. This was danger. Renee held Noah tighter, her voice steady despite the storm inside her. "Evelyn, you need help. Real help." "I can't," Evelyn cried. "I've tried everything. I don't know how to be better." Renee looked down at the child, finally breathing against her chest, safe for this moment. Then she made the hardest decision of her life. "If you can't take care of him right now," she said quietly, "then let me stay. Let me help. For him." Evelyn looked up, broken and desperate, and nodded, because sometimes salvation doesn't arrive gently. Sometimes it crashes through the wreckage and asks you to choose. The night everything changed, it didn't feel heroic. It felt terrifying. Sirens cut through the quiet like a wound being opened. Renee stood on the driveway holding Noah, his small body pressed against her chest, his heartbeat fast, but real. Inside the house, paramedics rushed past broken glass and spilled food toward a woman who had finally collapsed under the weight of pretending she was okay. Evelyn survived. Barely. But survival came with consequences. By morning, the truth was unavoidable until she was stable. Until doctors could be sure Noah was safe, he couldn't stay there. The word removal hovered in the air like a threat. When the social worker arrived, clipboard in hand, Noah clung harder to Renee's shirt. He didn't cry. He didn't scream. He just held on because he finally understood what safety felt like, and he wasn't ready to lose it. "He needs to go somewhere secure," the woman said gently. "A foster placement. Temporary." "No," Renee said before she could stop herself. The room went quiet. "I'll take him," she continued, her voice shaking now, but steady enough to stand on. "I know I'm not family. I know I'm not licensed. But he knows me. He trusts me. Please don't put him with strangers." For a long moment, no one spoke. Then the social worker looked down at Noah, at the way his breathing slowed, only when Renee held him, at the way his fingers stayed curled into her sleeve, like it was an anchor. 3 hours later, paperwork was signed that almost never got approved. Emergency guardianship. That night, Renee brought Noah to her small apartment in East LA. No marble floors, no chandeliers, just thin walls, worn furniture, and neighbors who waved from their doors. She made him dinner, mac and cheese, apple slices, milk in a regular cup. Nothing fancy, nothing scary. Noah ate slowly. Afterward, he climbed into her lap, rested his head against her shoulder, and sighed. Not the sigh of relief that comes from being full, but the one that comes from being safe. In a home with no money and no silence, Noah slept through the night for the first time in his life. And Renee understood with a mixture of awe and fear that she hadn't just stepped in temporarily. She had stepped into a child's becoming. Recovery didn't arrive like a miracle. It came quietly, one appointment at a time, one honest sentence spoken out loud after years of silence. From the hospital bed, Evelyn finally said the words she had swallowed for 2 years. "I can't do this alone." The diagnosis came with relief and shame braided together, severe postpartum depression untreated, allowed to rot in the dark. Medication was adjusted. Therapy began. For the first time since Noah was born, someone wasn't asking her to try harder, but to rest and heal. And she did. Not perfectly, not quickly, but sincerely. During those weeks, Noah stayed with Renee. He learned new rhythms, meals eaten slowly at a small kitchen table. Bedtime stories read on a worn couch, laughter drifting through open windows. His body softened, not from restriction, but from safety. He played. He slept. He breathed like a child who no longer had to stay alert. Then came the day Evelyn asked through her therapist, "Can I see him?" The visit was small, supervised, fragile. Evelyn sat on the floor, hands trembling in her lap, afraid to reach. Noah hid behind Renee's legs, peeking out with cautious eyes. Evelyn didn't push. She didn't cry. She just whispered, "Hi, baby," like she was meeting him for the first time. And in many ways she was. She came back again. And again. She learned to sit in the discomfort, to let silence exist, without filling it with food or apologies. She listened when Noah brought her a toy. She stayed when he looked away. Slowly, painfully, trust began to reassemble itself, piece by piece. Evelyn made a choice that broke her pride, but saved her son. "I want him to stay with you," she told Renee one afternoon, tears steady, but resolved. "Until I'm ready. Until I can be the mother he deserves." It wasn't surrender. It was love without ownership. Together they began something rare and brave. Not replacement, not rescue, but shared care. Two women from different worlds bound by the same child, choosing healing over ego. And in that choice, a broken family didn't disappear. It transformed. 1 year later, the park was loud with laughter. Not the sharp, desperate crying that once echoed through marble halls, but the bright, breathless sound of a little boy running too fast, tripping, getting back up, and laughing again. Noah was 3 now. Lighter on his feet. Easier in his breath. His body no longer carried the weight of fear it once had. On a bench beneath a wide oak tree sat Renee and Evelyn, watching him race toward the slide like the world had always been safe. It hadn't been easy. Healing never is. There were setbacks. Nights when Noah still woke up crying. Days when Evelyn doubted herself, when guilt crept back in like a shadow she thought she'd outrun. There were moments Renee wondered if she'd taken on more than she could carry. But they didn't run. Not anymore. They stayed. They talked. They asked for help when the old instinct was to disappear, and slowly something extraordinary took shape. Evelyn learned how to be present without panic, how to hold her son without fear of failing, how to sit on the floor and build towers that fell over and laugh instead of apologizing. She didn't try to be perfect. She tried to be there. Renee never tried to replace her. She stood beside her, steady, constant, a bridge when the ground still felt unsteady. That afternoon, Noah ran back, cheeks flushed, eyes bright. "Mama?" he said, tugging at Evelyn's hand. Then he turned just as naturally and smiled at Renee Shaw. 2 women, 1 child. Not the family anyone planned, but the family he needed. The mansion was gone from their daily lives now. So was the illusion that money could protect a child from loneliness. What replaced it was smaller, messier, imperfect, and alive. Because in the end, Noah hadn't been healed by diets or schedules or silence. He had been healed by presence, by hands that stayed, by adults who chose courage over comfort. And that made all the difference. In the end, what saved Noah was never a diet plan, a doctor's chart, or the size of a bank account. It was something far simpler and far harder. It was someone who stayed. For a long time, Noah's story looked like a tragedy wrapped in luxury. A child surrounded by wealth yet starving for connection. A mother drowning in shame and exhaustion. A father convinced that distance and money were the same as love. And a house so big it swallowed every cry without answering it. But healing didn't come when everything was fixed. It came when the truth was finally seen. A child doesn't cry to manipulate. A child cries to be found. When Renee chose presence over permission, when Evelyn chose honesty over pride, when both women chose love over fear, something powerful happened. Not perfection, not a fairy tale ending, but something real, something human. Noah learned that food wasn't the answer to pain. Evelyn learned that asking for help wasn't failure. And Renee proved that sometimes the greatest thing you can give someone isn't money, advice, or control. It's the courage to show up and stay. Because love isn't loud. It doesn't always look impressive. Most of the time, it looks like sitting on the floor, listening, holding, and not leaving when things get messy. In the real world, the wounds we can't see are often the ones doing the most damage. And healing begins the moment someone feels safe enough to be honest. If you can be that safe place for someone, even once, you may change a life forever. If this story touched something in your heart, let us know in the comments. Have you ever been saved by someone who simply stayed? Or been that person for someone else? Don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share this story with someone who might need to hear it today. Because maybe, just maybe, this message was meant for you.